The hospital sounded different at night. Not quieter. Just thinner. Voices did not carry the same way. Footsteps echoed longer. Machines seemed louder than they were. Even the fluorescent lights hummed with a tone that daytime never noticed. At 2:17 a.m., the emergency department was running on its last clean thread of order. Monitors pulsed uneven rhythms. A trauma resident stood at the central station arguing softly into a phone about bed availability that did not exist. A respiratory therapist moved quickly between bays, her shoes whispering across the polished floor. A janitor paused beside a spill, studying it as if deciding whether it mattered yet. And at the far end of the nurses' station stood a woman no one had assigned. She wore standard navy scrubs, slightly faded, sleeves rolled once with careful symmetry. Her badge hung straight, unflipped, resting exactly at mid-chest. No charms. No stickers. No department ribbons. Just a name and the word float beneath it. She was not sitting. She had not sat for the past hour. She watched. Not openly. Not obviously. But steadily. Her eyes moved across the department in slow intervals: monitor, hallway, door, staff posture, patient breathing, supply cart levels, exit signs, clock, oxygen valves. Then back again. A junior nurse brushed past her carrying a tray. "Sorry," the younger woman muttered automatically, not looking. The quiet nurse inclined her head once. No correction. No comment. At Bay 3, a cardiac patient shifted wrong in the bed. The monitor had not alarmed yet. No numbers had changed. The waveform still looked acceptable. The quiet nurse walked there before anyone called. She adjusted the man's pillow 2 centimeters to the left. Straightened his wrist where the 4-line bent. Lifted the oxygen tubing so it no longer pressed against his throat. His breathing evened. The monitor never sounded. She stepped away before the attending physician turned around. At the station, 2 nurses spoke in low voices. "Is she new?" "I think agency. She hasn't charted anything. Maybe she doesn't know the system." They did not lower their voices further. They did not need to. She gave no sign of hearing them. A trauma resident approached her with a chart half open. He looked tired in the careless way of someone who had not slept enough days in a row. "You covering 4 or 5? Her eyes moved once to the board. 5 is stable, she said. "For needs labs repeated in 12 minutes. He frowned slightly, checking his watch, then the chart. "Why 12? "Because the last draw clotted early." He blinked once. Looked down again. She had already stepped aside. Across the department, a monitor chirped twice. A different nurse rushed to silence it. The quiet one did not look. She already knew what it was. At 2:29 a.m., a supply cart rolled past with only half its drawers filled. She stopped it with 2 fingers. The orderly pushing it paused. "Yeah." She slid open the 3rd drawer. Empty saline flushes. 4th drawer. 2 left. She closed them gently. "You'll run out in 14 minutes, she said. The orderly stared at her. "We just restocked." She nodded once toward Bay 7. "Mass transfusion setup. They'll pull 8 at once." He hesitated. Looked toward 7. A nurse there was already opening the cart. He turned back slowly. "Right." He pushed the cart away faster. She did not watch him go. At the central desk, a senior doctor finally noticed her. Noticed not because of what she was doing. Because she was still there. He leaned toward another physician. "Who's that?" The other glanced briefly. "Float." She assigned? "Probably covering overflow." The doctor nodded, satisfied with an answer that required no follow-up. They returned to their discussion. 2:41 a.m. Ambulance radio static crackled faintly from the wall speaker. No one paid attention. The channel was always talking. Most of it was routine transport chatter. Vitals. Locations. Estimates. The quiet nurse's eyes shifted toward it. She did not move closer. She just listened. A phrase repeated. Not loud. Not urgent. Just unusual. Her gaze stilled. Across the room, someone laughed softly at a phone video. A monitor beeped. A printer spat paper. Normal sounds. Her attention did not leave the speaker. Another phrase came through. Different voice. Same wording. Her fingers rested lightly on the counter. Still. Calculating. Behind her, one of the younger nurses spoke again, barely whispering. She's kind of strange. The other shrugged. As long as she stays out of the way. The quiet nurse's expression did not change. But her eyes shifted once more toward the ambulance channel. Listening. Measuring. Waiting. At 2:44 a.m., she stepped to the whiteboard. No one asked why. She erased a room assignment. Moved a name. Swapped 2 bed numbers. Adjusted a triage note. Small changes. Precise ones. The charge nurse noticed from across the station. Who moved that? No one answered. The quiet nurse set the marker down. And returned to her place against the wall. Hands loosely folded. Watching the department breathe. As if she were timing it. The ambulance channel spoke again. Most nights it blended into the background like ventilation hum or distant traffic. Staff heard it without listening, the way people heard rain when they were indoors long enough. But repetition changes sound. At 2:47 a.m., the same coded phrase came through for the third time. The quiet nurse did not look at the speaker. She watched the reflection of it instead, its small metal grill mirrored faintly in the glass of a supply cabinet across the hall. Her posture remained relaxed, weight evenly balanced, shoulders loose. Nothing about her suggested attention. Only her eyes had changed. They no longer scanned the room. They counted. Across the station, the charge nurse sighed over a staffing screen. We're down 2 techs and transports backed up again, she said to no one in particular. A resident rubbed his temple. Tell EMS to divert non-critical. They already are. Another monitor chirped. A patient coughed. Paper rustled. Normal. The radio clicked. A new voice spoke. Calm. Male. Controlled breathing. The same phrase. Not shouted. Not urgent. Repeated. The quiet nurse's fingers pressed lightly against the counter edge once, then released. She stepped toward the trauma supply rack. Opened a drawer. Closed it. Shifted one tray to the left. Moved a sealed airway kit from the bottom shelf to eye level. No one asked her why. They assumed she had been told. At Bay 2, a middle-aged man began to shiver beneath a thin hospital blanket. The assigned nurse was busy inserting N4 in another patient. The quiet nurse passed by. Paused. Adjusted the thermostat dial beside the bed without looking at it. Pulled a second blanket from the warmer. Covered the patient's shoulders. He stopped shivering within seconds. She was already walking away when his monitor alarmed briefly for movement artifact. The assigned nurse hurried over. What happened? Nothing, the patient said. I'm good. The quiet nurse did not turn back. 2:52 a.m. Outside the ambulance bay doors, headlights swept once across the frosted glass. Too many beams for a single vehicle. They passed. Silence returned. Inside, a young nurse leaned against the desk near the quiet one, sipping lukewarm coffee. "You hear that radio stuff?" she asked casually. "Sounds like they're talking in riddles tonight." No response. The young nurse glanced sideways. The quiet nurse's gaze remained forward, focused on nothing obvious. "You think they do that on purpose?" the younger woman continued. "Like, code so civilians don't understand?" The quiet nurse spoke without looking at her. "They're not for civilians." The nurse blinked. "Who are they for?" No answer. A beat passed. The younger nurse gave a small shrug and took another sip. "Weird night." She drifted away. The quiet nurse's eyes shifted to the clock. 2:53. She listened. The radio clicked again. Static. Then. The phrase. Fourth time. Different voice. Same cadence. Her breathing slowed slightly. Not tension. Recognition. She reached for a pen lying beside an unattended chart. Turned it once between her fingers. Set it down exactly parallel to the paper's edge. Across the department, a paramedic entered through the sliding doors carrying paperwork. "Anyone free for signature?" No one moved immediately. The quiet nurse stepped forward. "I can sign." He handed the form over gratefully. "Thanks. Busy night?" She scanned the document once. Her eyes paused on the dispatch timestamp. "Not long. Just enough." "Where'd you clear from?" she asked. "North Sector." "How many units staged?" He frowned slightly. 3, I think." "Why?" She signed the form and handed it back. "No reason." He nodded, already turning away. She watched him leave. At the main desk, the charge nurse noticed the whiteboard again. The bed swaps. The triage reorder. She frowned. "Did you move these?" The quiet nurse looked at her. "Yes." "Why?" "Flow will bottleneck in 12 minutes. The charge nurse glanced instinctively toward the hallway. Nothing there. She looked back. "How do you know that?" The quiet nurse held her gaze for 1 second. "Because it always does at this hour." The answer sounded simple. Routine. Predictable. The charge nurse hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right." She accepted it. People accept calm certainty faster than explanations. 2:56 a.m. Outside, another set of lights washed across the ambulance doors. These did not pass. They stopped. Inside, no one reacted yet. The department continued its tired rhythm, typing, footsteps, distant coughing, the soft tear of medical tape. The radio clicked again. Silence. No voice this time. Just open channel. The quiet nurse's head tilted a fraction, listening to what was not being said. Her eyes shifted once toward the ambulance entrance. She did not move. But every muscle had gone still. Not frozen. Ready. Across the room, the younger nurse called out, half joking. "Hey, if anything crazy comes in tonight, I'm clocking out." A few tired smiles answered her. The quiet nurse said nothing. Her gaze remained on the doors. Waiting. Counting something no one else could see. At 2:58 a.m., the ambulance bay doors opened without a sound. Not slid. Opened. Someone had disengaged the automatic track and pushed them manually. That was the first thing the quiet nurse noticed. Manual entry meant urgency without announcement. The second thing she noticed was spacing. The first man through the doorway did not rush. He moved fast, but not blindly. His steps were measured, weight placed through the outer edges of his boots to reduce noise against the tile. His eyes scanned corners before his shoulders passed them. He was carrying the front end of a stretcher. The second man carried the rear. Both wore civilian jackets. Both wore the same boots. Behind them, 2 more entered. They did not touch the gurney. They watched the room. Rifles hung tight to their chests on controlled slings, muzzles angled safely down but positioned for lift without adjustment. The emergency department did not react at first. People rarely react to what they do not expect to see. Then the younger nurse near the desk turned. And froze. Her voice did not finish. The charge nurse looked up. The respiratory therapist stopped mid-step. The resident lowered his phone slowly. The stretcher rolled forward under steady hands. On it lay a man in camouflage fatigues darkened by blood and soil. His face was pale beneath streaks of dried dirt. A field bandage wrapped his abdomen, already soaked through. One gloved hand still gripped a torn strap from tactical gear someone had cut away in a hurry. No one spoke. Not because of the patient. Because of the rifles. Hospital security was posted at the far corridor, too distant to intervene quickly. Visitors were not allowed weapons. Law enforcement arrivals were announced in advance. This had not been announced. The lead carrier stopped at the trauma bay threshold. "We need a surgeon," he said. His tone was not loud. It did not need to be. The charge nurse stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, you can't bring weapons into. He dies in 9 minutes without internal control. Not aggressive. Not emotional. Clinical." The charge nurse faltered. The resident stepped beside her. "What happened?" "Penetrating abdominal trauma. Field stabilized. Bleeding resumed en route." The resident nodded automatically, brain switching to protocol. "Okay. Bay 3. Move." The stretcher rolled forward. The 2 armed men behind them adjusted positions in silent coordination, forming a loose perimeter that did not interfere with staff movement but covered every visible entrance line. The quiet nurse watched their feet. Not their weapons. Feet showed training. Weapon posture could be taught. Feet revealed habit. These men moved like they had trained together for years. The patient was transferred onto the hospital bed. Monitors connected. Vitals appeared. Blood pressure low. Pulse fast. Respiration shallow. The trauma team began working. 2 large-bore IVs. Type and cross. Prep ultrasound. Orders overlapped. Gloves snapped. Metal instruments clicked. Through it all, the armed men remained still. Watching. Not interfering. But not relaxing. The quiet nurse shifted slightly to the side of the room. Not closer. Not farther. From there she could see all 4 of them at once. She studied shoulders. Eye movement. Breathing rhythm. Hierarchy. One of them kept glancing toward the tallest man near the wall. Not consciously. Instinctively. Leadership recognition. Except. The tall one did not respond like a leader. He watched the doors more than the team. His jaw tightened each time the radio on his vest hissed. The quiet nurse's gaze settled there. On the radio. It crackled again. Static. A voice spoke, faint, distorted. "Confirm, perimeter, awaiting." The tall soldier lifted it quickly. "Repeat last." No response. Static swallowed the channel. He pressed the transmit button. "Command, this is." He stopped. Not because of signal loss. Because he did not finish the call sign. A half-second hesitation. Small. But final. He lowered the radio slightly. The others noticed. No one commented. But their shoulders changed. Not fear. Uncertainty. The quiet nurse's eyes did not move from his hand. He tried again. Command, respond. Silence. Across the trauma bay, the surgeon entered pulling on gloves. What do we have? Penetrating abdominal, unstable pressure, the resident answered. Or ready? Prep in progress. The surgeon nodded once and stepped to the bedside. The room's attention shifted to medicine. Except for the quiet nurse. She watched the soldiers. Listened to the radio. Measured the pauses between transmissions. Counted the seconds no one else counted. Another burst of static. Another fragment of voice. Unit, hold, do not. Cut off. The tall soldier's grip tightened around the device. He looked toward the others. Not for orders. For confirmation. They gave none. Because they did not have any. The realization settled through the group like a change in air pressure. Their command channel was gone. And they knew it. The quiet nurse exhaled once. Soft. Almost soundless. She stepped forward. Not into the center. Just enough to be heard if she spoke. She did not speak yet. The radio hissed again. The tall soldier raised it. Waited. Nothing. Behind him, one of his teammates shifted weight for the first time since entering. Not impatience. Readiness. The quiet nurse's voice came quietly into the space between static bursts. Who's holding your operational authority? Every soldier in the room turned toward her. Not startled. Not offended. Alert. Because she had not asked what happened. She had asked the only question that mattered. And she had used the correct words. For a moment, no one answered her. The trauma bay remained active, gloves moving, instruments passing, the surgeon issuing clipped instructions, but the center of attention had shifted without anyone announcing it. Four armed men looked at the nurse no one had noticed an hour ago. Not suspicious. Not hostile. Evaluating. The tall one held the radio loosely now, thumb resting near the transmit switch but not pressing it. Up close, the strain around his eyes showed through the calm he was trying to maintain. Who are you? He asked. Not sharp. Direct. She did not answer his question. Her gaze stayed on the radio in his hand. Who's holding your operational authority? She repeated. The wording was exact again. Not commanding officer. Not leader. Operational authority. Specific. Functional. Field language. The tallest soldier studied her face more carefully this time. Behind him, one of the others shifted his stance a few degrees, unconsciously giving her a clearer line of sight to the device. Not deference. Access. We lost primary, the tall one said quietly. Relays intermittent. He said it the way someone states a measurement, not a complaint. She nodded once. Not surprised. Across the bay, the surgeon spoke sharply. Pressure dropping. I need blood now. The resident turned. On it. Movement resumed at speed. The charge nurse, however, was staring between the rifles and the quiet nurse, uncertainty tightening her expression. We can't have weapons in here, she said, voice low but firm. This is a hospital. No one responded immediately. The soldiers did not move. They did not challenge her. They simply did not comply. The quiet nurse glanced at the charge nurse. They stay. It was not loud. It was not forceful. It sounded like a clinical decision. The charge nurse blinked. Excuse me? Before the moment could sharpen, the radio crackled again. All four soldiers' attention snapped back to it. Static. Then. Units maintain, perimeter breach possible, confirm status. The transmission broke apart in a wash of noise. The tall soldier raised the radio. Command, this is. He stopped again. That half-second hesitation returned. The quiet nurse watched it happen. Watched his jaw set. Watched his eyes flick once toward the others. They were waiting for him. He did not have what they needed. That was the fracture point. Not panic. Absence. She spoke, still calm. You're outside your chain. His gaze snapped back to her. Not anger. Recognition. Because that was exactly what it felt like. One of the other soldiers studied her more closely now. His eyes dropped briefly to her badge, then back to her face. Float. No rank. No insignia. Nothing that matched the sentence she had just said. The charge nurse stepped nearer, voice tightening. Look, I don't know what's going on, but she doesn't give orders here. The quiet nurse did not look at her. She kept her eyes on the tall soldier. You have perimeter elements? She asked. Yes. How many? A beat. 2 teams. Distance? Outer grid. Unknown movement reported. She nodded once, absorbing it as if reading numbers from a chart. The charge nurse stared. Why are you answering her? No one replied. The surgeon spoke again from the bedside. If he doesn't get to the OR in 5 minutes, this becomes a recovery instead of a surgery. The words landed heavily. Time was now measurable. The tall soldier looked toward the hallway that led to the operating suites. Then back to the radio. Then at the quiet nurse. He did not ask permission. He asked a question instead. What would you do? It was not a challenge. It was not sarcasm. It was a field evaluation. The room did not understand what had just happened. But the soldiers did. The quiet nurse stepped closer, not toward him, but toward the edge of the trauma bed, where she could see both the patient and the corridor leading to the surgical wing. Her eyes moved once down the hall. Counted doors. Corners. Angles. She spoke without raising her voice. You hold position until transfer starts. She pointed lightly toward the corridor. 2 there. 1 rear. 1 with him. No hesitation. No explanation. Just placement. The soldiers did not move yet. They watched her. Not because they doubted. Because they were measuring certainty. She looked at the tall one again. Your perimeter teams will escalate if they lose signal again, she said. You need a stable channel before they do. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. She understood external unit behavior. Not guessed. Understood. The charge nurse stepped forward again. All right, that's enough. I need someone in charge here and it isn't. The quiet nurse extended her hand toward the radio. Not suddenly. Not forcefully. She simply held it there. Waiting. The tall soldier looked at her hand. Then at her eyes. Silence stretched. Behind him, one of his teammates spoke for the first time, voice low. Sir. Just that. The tall soldier inhaled once. Decision. He placed the radio in her hand. The movement was small. But every soldier in the room straightened slightly as it happened. The plastic casing settled against her palm. Warm from his grip. She lifted it to her ear. Listened. Static washed through. Her expression did not change. She pressed the transmit switch. When she spoke, her tone was different. Not louder. Not sharper. Structured. Unidentified command node, authenticate relay origin and status. The room went still. Even the surgeon glanced up. Because the cadence had changed. It no longer sounded like a nurse speaking. It sounded like someone who expected an answer. Static filled the speaker. 3 seconds. 4. Then. A voice came through. Clear. Immediate. Relay confirms. Standing by. The quiet nurse lowered the radio slightly. Around her, no one in the hospital spoke. Because the reply had not sounded confused. It had sounded obedy. No one asked who she was. Not the doctors. Not the nurses. Not the soldiers. The question existed, but it did not rise. It stayed where instinct had pushed it, down, beneath observation, beneath the quiet understanding that something precise and irreversible had just taken place. The radio remained in her hand. She did not grip it tightly. Her fingers rested around it the way someone holds an instrument they have used for years, not something borrowed. Static whispered through the speaker. She listened without speaking. Across from her, the tall soldier watched her face the way trained operators watch terrain, looking for signals, not expressions. The reply had been immediate. Too immediate for coincidence. Which meant someone on the other end had been waiting for the correct voice pattern. Not her voice. Her structure. She pressed the transmit button again. Relay, confirm outer team's last verified positions. Her tone stayed even. No strain. No authority performance. Just clean transmission. A pause. Then. Outer 1 north entrance. Outer 2 ambulance approach. Both holding. She nodded once, though the voice could not see it. Signal stability window? Unknown. Interference intermittent. She released the button. Silence returned. Behind her, a pen dropped onto the tile. The sound seemed louder than it should have been. No one turned toward it. The tall soldier spoke quietly. You're not guessing. It was not a question. She did not look at him. Her eyes remained on the middle distance, attention divided between the radio's faint hiss and the corridor leading to surgery. No. One word. Nothing added. He studied her profile another second. Not trying to identify her. Trying to understand the boundary of her capability. At the bedside, the surgeon's voice cut through. We're moving. Now. The room shifted into motion. Rails lifted. Lines checked. Monitors transferred to portable leads. The quiet nurse stepped sideways to clear the path before anyone asked her to. She did not watch the patient. She watched the hallway. 2 soldiers moved to the front automatically. One pivoted to the rear. The tall one stayed beside the bed. Exactly where she had placed them. The charge nurse noticed. Her eyes moved from the formation, to the quiet nurse, then back again. No one had told them to move. Except. Her gaze settled on the radio in the nurse's hand. Understanding did not fully form. But doubt had begun. The stretcher rolled into the corridor. Fluorescent light stretched in a long white line overhead. The floor reflected their movement in broken shapes. The quiet nurse walked beside the wall, not in the center. From there she could see reflections before bodies appeared, angles before footsteps sounded. She lifted the radio again. Outer 1, confirm visual discipline. A beat. Confirmed. Outer 2, report ambient. A longer pause. Minimal movement. 1 civilian vehicle passed. No approach. Maintain distance. Copy. She lowered the device. Behind her, one of the younger nurses whispered to another, barely audible. Why are they listening to her? No answer came. Because no one knew. Halfway down the corridor, hospital security appeared from a side hall. 2 officers. Hands raised, uncertain, palms outward in a gesture meant to slow without escalating. You can't bring firearms past this point, one said carefully. The lead ranger's shoulders shifted. Not aggressive. Prepared. Before he could speak, the quiet nurse did. They're cleared. The officer blinked. Ma'am, I don't have authorization for that. She turned her head slightly. Not fully. Just enough for him to see her eyes. You do. It was not a threat. It was not persuasion. It sounded like a correction. He hesitated. His training told him to insist. His instincts told him not to interrupt. He stepped aside. Not consciously deciding to. Simply not stopping them. They passed. Behind them, he exhaled slowly, unsure why his pulse had quickened. At the operating suite doors, the surgical team took over the bed and guided it inside. The armed men stopped at the threshold, holding position exactly as she had placed them. The doors swung shut. Silence settled in the hallway. The kind that follows motion. The tall soldier looked at her. Up close, fatigue showed more clearly now, fine lines at the corners of his eyes, dust ground into the seams of his sleeves, a thin smear of dried blood across one wrist that was not his. You knew they'd answer, he said. Yes. How? She tilted her head slightly, listening to the radio again before replying. They were waiting for correct protocol. He absorbed that. Not confused. Confirming. Behind him, one of his teammates spoke quietly, almost to himself. Command voice. The words were soft. But they carried. The quiet nurse did not react. She only adjusted her grip on the radio a fraction and pressed transmit once more. Relay, update threat probability. Static. Then. Revised assessment pending. Stand by for directive. She released the switch. Her gaze lifted to the corridor intersection ahead. Still. Calculating. The tall soldier followed her line of sight. Nothing was there. Yet. He looked back at her. Are you assuming control? It was asked respectfully. Formally. Like a field acknowledgement. She did not answer immediately. 3 seconds passed. 4. Then she said, quietly. I'm preventing mistakes. The distinction mattered. He nodded once. Accepted. Behind them, the hospital continued breathing, distant footsteps, rolling carts, muffled voices through walls. Ordinary sounds. Inside that ordinariness stood a woman in faded scrubs holding a military channel that did not belong to her. And no one who understood what that meant felt inclined to take it away. The corridor outside the operating suite had only 2 sounds. Ventilation. Radio static. The quiet nurse stood beside the wall, the device resting lightly in her hand, eyes moving not in sweeps but in measured angles, door frame, ceiling corner, reflection in the stainless crash cart, security camera dome, intersection beyond. The rangers did not speak. They had shifted subtly since the doors closed. Their spacing had adjusted by inches. Sight lines no longer overlapped unnecessarily. Coverage angles now staggered instead of mirrored. No one had ordered the change aloud. They had simply followed the geometry she created when she chose where to stand. Footsteps approached from the east corridor. Not hurried. Not cautious. Regular. A janitorial worker pushing a mop bucket turned the corner, saw the armed men, and stopped so abruptly the water inside sloshed against the rim. He stared. The nearest ranger gave a small motion with 2 fingers, gentle, downward. Not a command. A reassurance. The worker nodded quickly and backed away the way people retreat from something they do not understand but instinctively respect. The quiet nurse watched his exit route until he disappeared. Then she spoke into the radio. Outer 1, log interior civilian movement East Hall. A voice answered immediately. Logged. No questions. No hesitation. At the far end of the corridor, a pair of residents appeared mid-conversation, reading a chart together as they walked. They slowed when they saw the formation. Their voices stopped. One of them opened his mouth, unsure whether to ask something or apologize for existing. The quiet nurse stepped half a pace forward. Use West Hall, she said calmly. No explanation. No urgency. They nodded at once and turned around. Neither of them realized they had obeyed before deciding to. She shifted her weight slightly. Not to rest. To listen. The building had changed. Most people could not hear it. Hospitals had a rhythm, rolling carts, distant pages, elevator chimes, murmured consultations. When tension entered a structure, that rhythm altered by fractions. Conversations shortened. Steps landed softer. Doors closed more carefully. The air tightened. The quiet nurse tracked that changed the way a medic tracks pulse pressure. Behind her, the tall ranger spoke in a low voice meant only for her. You've done this inside civilian structures before. Not suspicion. Observation. She kept her eyes forward. Yes. No elaboration. He accepted that the way professionals accept facts that will not be expanded. The radio hissed. Update pending. She lifted it. Relay, define interference source. Static. Unknown origin. Not atmospheric. Her gaze shifted once toward the ceiling. Internal. Not storm. Not terrain. Something closer. She released the transmit button. The tall ranger watched her eyes move. You think it's deliberate, he said. I think it's controlled. A difference again. He absorbed that. Behind them, one of his teammates subtly adjusted position to cover the cross corridor without being told. Hospital security returned. This time with a supervisor. Older. Slower steps. Careful posture. He approached with visible effort to appear calm. Ma'am, he said politely, I need to understand what's happening in my building. She turned toward him fully for the first time. Her expression remained neutral. Your building is stable. He waited. She did not continue. Are we under threat? He asked. Yes. The word landed softly. He swallowed. What kind? Unconfirmed. Not vague. Accurate. He nodded slowly, absorbing that with the gravity of someone who understood the weight of uncertainty. What do you need from us? Keep your staff moving normally. He frowned. Normally? Yes. That's all? That's all. He studied her a moment longer. There was no badge on her identifying authority. No insignia. No visible reason to accept instruction. Yet nothing in her posture suggested she might be wrong. He nodded once. All right. He turned and walked away, already pulling a radio from his belt to relay instructions. One of the rangers watched him go, then murmured quietly. He didn't ask who you were. No, she said. Silence returned. Then. The radio snapped alive. Possible movement near outer perimeter, unconfirmed, stand by. Her thumb pressed the transmit switch instantly. Outer units hold position. Do not converge. Maintain distance. A beat. Copy. She released the button. The tall ranger studied her. If there's movement, shouldn't they close? No. Why? If they close without confirmation, they create a target. He considered that. Nodded once. Correct. A nurse pushing a medication cart approached from the far hall, distracted by her notes. She looked up, startled at the sight of rifles, and froze mid-step. The quiet nurse walked to her. Not fast. Not slow. She reached out and gently rotated the cart 10 degrees. "Continue to ICU," she said. The nurse blinked. "But this is..." "ICU," she repeated softly. The woman nodded and continued without another word. The tall ranger watched the interaction closely. "You redirected her route?" "Yes." "Why?" "She would have stopped here." "And?" "She would have asked questions." He almost smiled. "Not amusement. Recognition." The radio crackled again, louder this time. "Contact report pending, possible approach vector." The hallway seemed to narrow. Even the ventilation sounded quieter. Every ranger's posture changed by a degree so small most people would miss it. The quiet nurse lifted the radio slowly. Her eyes fixed on the empty intersection ahead. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "Relay, confirm vector." Static washed through. For a moment there was no answer. The silence stretched. Then. "Vector toward ambulance access." No one moved. No one spoke. The quiet nurse lowered the radio. Her gaze did not leave the corridor. "They're early," she said. The tall ranger's eyes sharpened. "Who is?" She did not answer. Because footsteps had just sounded somewhere beyond the intersection. Not running. Walking. Coming closer. Measured. Intentional. The rangers shifted their stance in perfect quiet. Not raising weapons. Not yet. Waiting. The quiet nurse watched the empty hallway. Listening. Counting the distance between each approaching step. Her expression did not change. But something in the air had. The operation had just moved from preparation to contact. The corridor outside the ICU had never felt heavier. Not physically. Not in temperature. But the quiet nurse felt the weight of responsibility in every step she took. The radio in her hand had become more than a tool. It was the lifeline between units, the instrument through which decisions shaped outcomes she could not yet fully see. Each command she had given, each subtle placement of soldiers and staff, carried consequences. A young nurse approached cautiously, cart in hand. Her face was pale, eyes wide. "Ma'am, are we safe?" she asked. The words were innocent. But the meaning cut sharper than any knife. The staff were trusting her. Entirely. The quiet nurse did not answer immediately. She studied the young nurse's face, the slight tremor in her hands, the tension in her shoulders. "Yes," she said finally. Calm. Neutral. But not dismissive. The young nurse nodded, still unsure, and returned to her tasks. The radio hissed again. Static, then a fragmented transmission. "Hostile movement, unconfirmed, advise hold." The quiet nurse pressed the transmit switch. "Relay, maintain positions. Do not engage until visual confirmation." A pause. Then acknowledgement. She released the device. Her eyes scanned the corridor. Her pulse remained steady. But internally, calculations ran faster than any external observer could track. Every path. Every angle. Every possible point of failure. She knew mistakes would cost lives. She also knew that every decision meant exposing herself. If someone questioned her authority, if a civilian stepped into the path of a soldier, if her placement was even a fraction off, the blame would fall entirely on her. Yet she did not step back. She did not hesitate. Minutes later, an alarm sounded from the ambulance bay, a vehicle approaching faster than scheduled. Rangers glanced at each other. Confusion. A hint of tension. The quiet nurse stepped forward, motioned toward a secondary access corridor. Redirect to staging. Keep them out of sight. One of the soldiers glanced at her. You're sending a civilian vehicle away? Yes. And if they refuse? A faint shrug. No stress in her voice. Then you manage the outcome. The tall ranger's jaw tightened. He understood what she meant, responsibility accepted, not delegated. She walked down the corridor slowly, checking each entry point, each corner, each doorway. Every step measured. Every movement precise. The radio hissed again. Another fragmented report. Possible breach, patient exposed, advise containment. She pressed the switch once more. Relay, maintain perimeters. Civilian traffic controlled. Await further confirmation. Acknowledgement came immediately. No one spoke. The weight of authority pressed inward. No applause would come. No one would recognize this command. Only the consequences would be visible, and even then, only to those attuned. A moment of quiet competence, she adjusted a monitor cable that had been rubbing against a patient's foreline, preventing a potential disconnect. Small, invisible. No one noticed. Yet it mattered. A moral tension arose: evacuate the hall, save staff from potential danger, or maintain position for patient stability. She chose stability. Risk accepted. Cost registered. A young orderly brushed past, nearly colliding with a soldier. The soldier froze. The quiet nurse intervened with a gentle hand on the man's shoulder. Stand aside, she said softly. He obeyed. No explanation. No orders. Just quiet authority. Time passed in measured increments. Every decision layered pressure on her conscience. Every command carried the weight of human life, the ethical balance between intervention and restraint. By the time the radio went silent again, she had already anticipated the next move, placing herself as the fulcrum between chaos and order. No one thanked her. No one would. She did not need it. Her responsibility, her sacrifice, was enough. The cost of authority was never recognition. It was being right when everyone else assumed you were wrong. And she had already paid it. Chapter 8, Contact. Word count target, 900. The footsteps came first. Measured. Deliberate. Not running. Not panicked. Not casual. They echoed off the polished tile, carried through the corridors like a warning. The quiet nurse's eyes shifted toward the intersection ahead. She did not move yet. She only watched, listening to subtle cues, the rhythm of each step, the weight behind it, the slight variation in pace. The rangers stiffened. Not at attention. Not preparing to fire. Waiting. Because the orders that mattered had already been given. She raised the radio slightly, spoke once in precise cadence. Outer units, verify approach. Do not engage without visual confirmation. Static. A pause. Then. Confirmed. Holding. Good. Timing perfect. The first figure appeared, a man in civilian clothing, eyes darting, hands stuffed in his pockets. He looked ordinary. Distracted. Harmless. But the quiet nurse already calculated angles. His stride, shoulder rotation, the subtle shift in weight suggested intent. One of the rangers tensed. She raised a hand, flat, palm forward. Not stopping him. Redirecting. The intruder slowed, confused. He was met not with rifles but with calm certainty. Turn left. Staging corridor, she said, voice quiet, neutral. The man hesitated, a flicker of recognition, or misjudgment, passing across his face. Then he complied. Rangers relaxed fractionally, understanding what she had done, engagement avoided without violence. Behind them, a second figure moved. Faster. Smarter. A shadow in rhythm with the first. The radio hissed again. Possible additional subject. She pressed the transmit button. Outer units, maintain perimeter. Observe and report only. Do not converge. A soft acknowledgement came back. The quiet nurse's gaze swept the corridor. Every door. Every junction. Every blind spot. She shifted slightly, repositioning a ranger with a single, almost imperceptible gesture. He followed. No words. No question. The second figure reached the ambulance bay entrance. He paused, scanning, searching. She did not shout. Did not raise her voice. Just pointed subtly toward a side exit. He followed the suggestion instinctively, as if guided by gravity rather than authority. The rangers moved again, silently closing angles behind him, never revealing the extent of control. She did not touch the radio. She did not speak. She merely observed. Everything balanced on observation. Everything controlled by calculation. Then the third. Closer now. Faster. Shoulder bag swinging. A device in his hand. The quiet nurse's thumb hovered over the radio's transmit switch. Not pressing yet. Not panicking. She analyzed, body language, stride, distance from doorways, line of sight. She pressed the button. Outer units, intercept corridor. Non-lethal containment only. Maintain civilian safety. Acknowledgement came almost instantly. The man entered the hallway. One ranger flanked him on the right, one on the left. Movement controlled, corners secured. The device in the intruder's hand dropped harmlessly to the floor without a struggle. No shots fired. No shouting. Just precision. The radio hissed once more. All targets secured. The quiet nurse lowered the device slightly. Her eyes scanned the team. Each ranger adjusted stance. The intrusion was contained. No one thanked her. No one even noticed fully what had just occurred. But she knew. And the rangers knew. The balance between order and chaos had been preserved. The patient in the OR remained unaware. Monitors continued their quiet beeping. The hospital resumed its rhythm, faint footsteps and rolling carts masking the recent danger. The quiet nurse stepped aside, letting the team regroup. Her presence alone maintained control, but she did not claim credit. Recognition was irrelevant. Competence mattered, not accolades. A young orderly paused beside her. "Ma'am, that was." She shook her head slightly. "Routine procedure." He frowned, unsure if he understood. She turned her attention back to the hallway, eyes scanning, calculating, listening. Nothing else mattered now except maintaining stability until the threat was fully neutralized. Because authority, true authority, was never loud. It was silent. Measured. Complete. And always borne with cost. The operating room doors swung open. The trauma team had stabilized the patient, but the work was far from over. Bleeding slowed, vitals steadied, but every second now counted toward survival. Outside, the quiet nurse lingered in the corridor, radio in hand, eyes sweeping every angle. Every shadow. Every potential threat vector. The rangers moved as she had positioned them, silent, precise, unflinching. Every door covered. Every hallway scanned. Every movement controlled. The radio hissed once, then again. Possible breach detected, perimeter integrity compromised. She pressed the transmit button lightly. Outer units, engage only if visual confirmed. Contain, do not converge. A pause. Then acknowledgement. The calm was deceptive. Every sound, footstep, cartwheel, distant monitor beep, was amplified in her awareness. She advanced slowly, along the wall, maintaining a line of sight to both the operating suite and the main corridor. The tall ranger approached. His voice low. "You could clear them all yourself." She did not look at him. "I maintain control." He nodded. Not questioning. Understanding. Recognition, silent. The final surge arrived, a team of 3 paramilitary operators, their approach unnoticed until the reflection of their boots shimmered in the polished floor. The quiet nurse did not panic. She stepped slightly forward, guiding the rangers by subtle gestures. No one spoke. No one fired. Not yet. One operator attempted to move into the main corridor. She tilted her hand toward the side passage. He complied instinctively, eyes narrowing, realizing the precision but unaware of its source. Another operator reached for a device. Her eyes flicked to him. One small movement, hand to hip, and he froze, recalculated, lowered the device. The third operator paused at the intersection, scanning rapidly. She spoke softly, deliberately. "Containment line. Maintain position. Observe only." He complied. No hesitation. The rangers shifted positions to support the instruction without a word. The radio crackled again. "Outer perimeter secured. All units report." She pressed transmit, acknowledged. "Maintain observation until patient is stable and extraction complete. No engagement unless necessary." Instant compliance. Her eyes lifted from the radio, scanning every reflection, every corner, every door. The OR team emerged, patient secured onto a stretcher. The quiet nurse adjusted a minor obstruction in the hallway, cable across the floor, monitor line, but no one noticed. Every action invisible, yet critical. The rangers moved forward with the patient, formation intact, positions precise. The tall one glanced back once. His eyes met hers. No words. But a flicker of acknowledgement. She nodded slightly. The extraction proceeded smoothly. Every variable accounted for, every angle controlled. Once the patient was in transit, the rangers paused, awaiting further instruction. The quiet nurse lowered the radio, stepping aside. "You've done well," the tall ranger said quietly, almost reverently. She did not respond. Not with words. Not yet. Recognition was unnecessary. Authority had already been exercised. Behind them, the hospital resumed its rhythm. Monitors beeped, footsteps echoed, carts rolled. The quiet nurse's presence remained unnoticed by most, but the ones who mattered had seen. She pressed the transmit switch one final time. "All units maintain positions until extraction complete. Then stand down." Acknowledgement came softly. She released the radio. A brief silence settled. The surge was over. The crisis contained. And the quiet nurse, still in faded scrubs, still without rank or recognition, remained exactly where she had been all night, observant, precise, composed. Authority had been exercised. Control had been asserted. Lives had been protected. And no one would ever fully know how. The hospital had returned to its usual rhythm. Monitors beeped softly. Carts rolled quietly. Footsteps echoed down the hall. The fluorescent lights hummed with a steady cadence. No one noticed the tension had lifted. No one realized the crisis had passed. The patient had been stabilized. The intruders neutralized, or at least contained, and the building remained intact. The quiet nurse walked slowly down the corridor. Every step measured. She did not rush. She did not linger. She only observed. The rangers had dispersed. Some returned to vehicles. Others lingered briefly near the ambulance bay, scanning the perimeter one last time. The tall one looked toward her, but did not approach. A nod passed silently between them, a mutual acknowledgement that needed no words. The charge nurse appeared at the intersection of the hall. Her expression was a mixture of relief and confusion. You handled all of that," she said softly. The quiet nurse did not look at her. "It's handled," she replied, voice neutral. No pride. No flourish. Just fact. The younger nurse from earlier peeked around a corner, curiosity barely contained. "Who are you, really?" The quiet nurse adjusted a tray on a mobile stand. "I'm just doing my job," she said. No one pressed further. No one needed to. The radio lay silent in her hand. Static filled the empty corridors only briefly before fading entirely. She set it down on a counter, aligning it perfectly with the edge of a chart. Everything in its place. Every detail measured. The hospital hummed around her. Staff moved, patients rested, machines continued their quiet vigilance. Life carried on as if nothing had happened. She walked past the trauma bays, checking monitors. Vitals stable. No urgent alerts. The patient who had been brought in during the crisis was now secure, unconscious but breathing steadily. Her gaze lingered on the OR doors briefly. Inside, the surgeons worked without knowing the extent of the orchestration that had just protected their space. In the ambulance bay, the Rangers quietly loaded gear into their vehicles. They did not salute. No handshakes were exchanged. Their respect was silent, unspoken, but real. The tall Ranger glanced toward the hospital one last time. His eyes found her as she exited the main corridor. A subtle tilt of his head, a gesture acknowledging competence, authority, and control, then he turned away. She made her way to the supply closet, retrieved a few items, and returned them to their places. Everything tidy, nothing out of order. Small acts of maintenance, invisible yet essential. In the staff lounge, a nurse murmured, "What happened tonight?" Everything seemed controlled. The quiet nurse poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee. She did not answer. She did not need to. The world had been held steady. Lives had been saved. Threats neutralized. Chaos contained. And no one outside those who understood would ever know how. She sat by the window, watching the first hints of dawn reflect off the hospital roof. The city was waking. Ambulances rolled in and out. The rhythm of life resumed. Her hands rested lightly on the counter. She sipped coffee slowly. Calmly. No recognition. No applause. No headlines. Just order restored. Quiet authority exercised. Lives protected. Cost paid. And she remained exactly where she had been all along, in the background, underestimated, unassuming. The world believed she was just a nurse. But she had been so much more. The soft hum of the hospital carried on. She let herself exhale. And then, finally, she stood and walked back into her work, unseen, unnoticed, but indispensable. The crisis had ended. The night was over. And the quiet nurse had prevailed.